program includes also a risk scoring that is performed by Visa in these transactions. However, the liability needs to be set on the issuer, so it offers protection to the merchants. And here we're also seeing that to this program, Visa has linked what we call the delegation authentication program. And you might know that since DAF was released, but initially we had the VDAP program. So the VDAP program was something that was run in Europe, where the merchant was running the authentication instead of the issuer, and that was complementing the DAF program so that transactions could be secured and could be verified on the merchant side. So the DAF program is something that is generic because it is also used for other programs, especially in the future. When we talk about Click-to-Pay, for example, Click-to-Pay is the first other Visa program that will benefit from the DAF. So with this coupled with VDAP, there was a couple of years, 3 years that were run with this program, but it actually had some issues. So the first issue that we can see here is that since the merchant was in charge of the authentication, well, the UX was depending on what the merchant was implementing. So there was, first of all, a lack of control when it comes to the issuer for the UX on the authentication, but also the authentication was different based on what the merchant was implementing. The second thing that we saw with VDAP is that there were some questionments on compliance with PSD2. Of course, we are talking about delegated authentication. So issuers were not really okay to actually move on to delegation overall because it was not satisfying their own control over the authentication when it comes to regulations. And last, it has been there for 3 years, but the adoption from merchants was pretty low. So it had problems picking up, and at this day, DAF is still relatively low in volume. So after all of this, Visa decided to replace the VDAP program for delegation and to introduce the FIDO on DAF. So the FIDO on DAF has multiple promises, and they definitely want to have something that runs well before activating it for programs such as Click-to-Pay and other elements to have this kind of delegation program. Quick note on VDAP. So VDAP is something that is about to disappear, but at this stage, there is no official sunset date from Visa. Okay, so we're talking about FIDO here. Before going further into how FIDO operates with DAF, what I'm proposing here is to show you a draft of some screens on the device that a user could see when using FIDO. So this is something that is made by Worldline. We have a mock of screens here, and I'm going to take you through the experience that a user can have when using FIDO for authentication method. All right, so we start on the left side. So we are on a device, mobile device, where a browser has opened a web page for a merchant. So there's a checkout phase where there's a product, and then the first payment leads to an actual authentication on the ACS. So this is a strong customer authentication performed by the ACS, where you have anything regular, so that's something that you are already used to, and it doesn't really matter which authentication method is used. So here you have an authentication page, which is also one of the future authentication pages that you will have with the Worldline ACS, and you have the SCA that is performed. So nothing very special here, but then we are moving on to the merchant web page back again to confirm the payment. And here we see something additional. We see the FIDO edition where the merchant proposes to the user to register FIDO credential to use in the future payments. So that's something very important here because after the payments, the merchant allows for FIDO registration. So let's say that the user agrees to do this. And of course, it's not mandatory. The user can just complete the payment and return back to the homepage. So that's fine. But if the users want to do that, it will create the authenticator ceremony for passkey creation. So there are two new words here. First of all, authenticator. So it is a very important thing to understand here. The authenticator is a mix of hardware and software that you have on devices. So pretty much on all mobile devices that you can name. Also on some, of course, physical computers. And for example, I'll give you a couple names of what it can be. It can be Windows Hello, it can be Apple ID, it can be Android fingerprinting. So there are multiple solutions that exist and that already exist on devices. So what it is a mix of sensors. So it can be fingerprint, it can be a camera for facial recognition. It could be voice recognition, it could be anything, but it could also use passwords or OTPs. So this authenticator is on the device and doesn't leave the device. And then we have what we call a passkey. So a passkey is something that is created by the authenticator that proves the identity of the person. So this identity is proven by doing what we call a gesture. So the gesture is, for example, putting your finger on the fingerprinting sensor. And with this identity, the authenticator creates a passkey, which is a couple of keys, public key and private key, for a given distant website, a distant server. In this case, we have shopping.com, which is the distant server. So the passkey is created, and the private key will be there to be able to sign future challenges to make sure that the identification comes from the registered authenticator. Okay, so at this stage, we are only at the creation, of course, and the user accepts to create the passkey and does the gesture, like we see on this screen there. That's the gesture, and it is created. So on the last step, we have another information that tells, okay, credential registered, payment succeeded. So what happened there is that, first of all, the private key is stored locally on the authenticator, and the public key that is created at the same time is sent to shopping.com. So at this stage, shopping.com has the public key. They know that there's a passkey for this device and for this user, and it will allow future authentication to happen between them two. So that's the enrollment process, which happens every time you have a new distant server here. Okay, so this one only exists for shopping.com. So next we're moving to the subsequent transactions flow. So we start at the same step where we are doing a purchase, whatever it is, and we're on the checkout process of the merchant. I am jumping directly to screen number 3 here. And what happens, so there's a lot going in the background. Of course, we don't see on the UX, that's the point of FIDO there, where the merchant shopping.com will send a challenge to the device, to the browser and to the device, telling, okay, I want to authenticate you. I know you have this authenticator, so I am sending you a challenge for this authenticator. I want you first to identify the person using your preferred way of doing the gesture. And then I want this identification to be signed by the authenticator. And I want to receive the signed challenge. So to do this, first of all, of course, the authenticator will prompt on an overlay of the website, a merchant website, will prompt to do the gesture. So that's what it does here. The user does the gesture. So that's the same gesture, of course, that the one that is already there since almost the creation of the device. The first time the user has the device, because that's the one, for example, it uses to access, to unlock the device. That's the same one. There is no new fingerprints to be created. So it uses that to identify the person locally, So at this stage, nothing leaves the device. And then the authenticator signs the challenge that was sent by the merchant. So it also means that the fingerprints and the whatever element that identifies the person on the device does not leave the device. It stays there. The only thing that leaves is the signed authentication, signed challenge. So that's one of the advantages as well of FIDO. It is that the personal information that identifies the person doesn't leave the device. And then it just leads to the merchant website to verify the signed challenge and say, okay, well, the authenticator that I know identified you, and this is the correct authenticator that you had the pass key for, and that I knew the public key for. So at this stage, everything is done. And what we've seen is that we have not left the merchant context. We were on the merchant website before. We had one pop-up here on the browser, but still on the merchant context, and that's it. So it is very low friction when it comes to a strong customer authentication. Now I just want to move back to the second screen. So when we talk about FIDO on browser here, there are two technologies that exist, which are WebAuthn, which is the legacy version of doing the ceremony between the merchant and the browser. And then there's SPC, so Secure Payment Confirmation. SPC is almost the same as WebAuthn. It actually uses WebAuthn, it's just an extension, but it adds a payment component where it actually adds a few information, which are the merchant, the credential, and the amount. So that's important because there will be an additional screen on and before the gesture that reminds the user what he is authenticating for. So that's an important step because we know when you talk about dynamic linking, that's something that we want, of course. And more than this, these data will be signed also in the challenge. So that's an important step. And we have this if SPC is used. So we'll see a bit later, but it's pretty much up to the merchant to implement the version, the solution they want. But it can have, of course, more security and more of what we want for payments when they are using SPC. So I'm not going deeper in this because there is a lot to say about this. There's a lot of discussions, a lot of improvements being made today, but that's just a side information. Okay, all right, so is there any questions so far when it comes to how the user experiments the FIDO authentication? It is important to understand what happens, because of course that's here what happens with FIDO and DAF, but that's also what's going to happen later in other solutions for FIDO. We don't have any question? Okay, so let's move to the next slide. Okay, so now we are jumping onto FIDO on DAF. So first of all, I want to get that clear right away. We're going to talk about what is mandatory, what is optional, and what is not mandatory at all. So FIDO on DAF, which is the replacement of VDAP, is mandatory for merchant. It starts April, so in roughly 10 days, meaning that any DAF transaction sent by a merchant needs to have FIDO authentication and FIDO data. So that's an important step. Now for issuers, so the FIDO on DAF, the thing that it brings, and that's what we're going to see the rest of this presentation, is that the authentication performed on the authenticator is verified, of course, by the merchant, but can be also verified by the issuer. And that's the main topic. So the FIDO authentication data will be sent to the issuer so the issuer can verify the authentication. So this verification of the issuer, it is not mandatory when it comes to Visa. They don't have a mandate. It's pretty much, if you want to verify it, then that's good for you, but there's no mandate for this. It's just up to you. So why would a user do that? Well, it's pretty simple. Of course, the authentication is delegated to the merchant, but the issuer might want, and that's when, and we're going back to the PSD2 compliance topic, the issuer might want to review the authentication themselves to make sure that they have control over whether the authentication is correct or not. They want to do this, of course, to be able to answer to some PSD2 requirements or audit that could happen where they have to prove that, of course, issuers know that that the user has been authenticated. They know that it is correct. It hasn't been tampered. So that's the main topic. If issuers want to have this proof of authentication verification for compliance, that's what DAF on FIDO on DAF offers. All right. So that being said, now we're going to see the different steps that involve the FIDO update on DAF, and we'll see how the ACS allows to do that. So in the next slides, until the end, we're going to talk about pre-enrollment, enrollment, and subsequent transactions. So in the UX slides that we saw, we had only one for pre-enrollment and enrollment. So pre-enrollment, what happens is that for a transaction, there will be an SCA. It's pretty much requested by the merchant. They want to do an SCA because it is a prerequisite to actually enroll a FIDO credential. So transaction with an SCA, and since the SCA is complete, they can use that. They can rely on the SCA to do the FIDO enrollment. So that's what we call the pre-enrollment at this stage. So once this is done, in between, what happens is that the merchant offers enrollment to FIDO to the user, and if the user accepts, we move on to the enrollment phase. The enrollment phase is so after the user has made the gesture and created the key pairs with the authenticator. The enrollment is when a second authentication request is sent to the issuer, to the ACS, with what we call the FIDO attestation. So remember this name, we're going to use it again after. The FIDO attestation is the FIDO name for the data that is created by the authenticator that contains the public key. So it's very important there because what happens for this step is that the enrollment consists in sending the public key in the FIDO attestation to the issuer, to the ACS for storage. It is just an information. It's not, it uses 3DS AREC for this, but it is not a transaction per se. And then we have subsequent transactions. So there's a payment, so there's a transaction that is being made. So that's a regular AREC, regular 3DS authentication. But it also adds what we call the FIDO assertion. So the FIDO assertion, like we said before, is the signed challenge created by the authenticator. It is included in the AREC, and at this stage, the ACS will receive both the transaction details in the AREC plus the data that contains the signed challenge. So remember these three steps, and we're going to go into the different solutions for this. All right, solutions. So let's go back to the roadmap we had before, and let's put together a VDAP and FIDO on that. So VDAP disappears. We said that before. There is an end date, but pretty much 1st of April, FIDO is mandatory. So starting there, well, there are 3 ways to do the FIDO verification. There is one general way, which is doing that on the issuer or ACS level. And the last one is using a Visa service. So let's start with the issuer solutions. So that's what we call the pass-through. The pass-through comes into 2 flavors. The first one is called the pass-through Worldline FIDO server. So Worldline has a FIDO server that is certified, that is there next to the ACS, ready to verify authentication, to store public keys for the service of the ACS. So it's all in one in the FIDO, in the Worldline ACS and FIDO server. Then we have the pass-through external FIDO server, where the server is pretty much on the issuer side. It could be somewhere else, but the idea is that it is external of the ACS domain. So again, it is a solution if issuers want to use their own solution for FIDO. And then we have the last one, which is on behalf of service, which is a service from Visa. So we can see here that, first of all, this service, there's a free trial that goes from April 1st to October 1st. The thing is that Visa actually proposes this free trial right away when transactions are not even picking up. And this service will directly send a verified value in the AREC, in a message extension. So it means that the ACS, if the issuer subscribes to this service, will receive additional data from Visa that says, okay, we have verified this authentication, it is correct, it is incorrect, and a few other data. All of these elements will come in 24/3. So roughly product-wise, it is on October 2024. So with this, I just want to mention also that there's a pilot that is led by Visa that already started pretty much, and that will most likely run until the end of 2024. So this one is very specific. The pilot from Visa is there to try FIDO data. It is not DAF transactions, so it means that there's no issuer liability on these. So there will be some transactions that they will try where we receive FIDO data on the transactions. Potentially, if the issuer wanted, they could review them, but the idea is just to share them and to make sure that the merchant can do that. So there is nothing very specific about this. You remember the pre-enrollment phase, so the ACS already does that, but there is nothing really to worry about this. It's just that Visa is doing that to try it out. Okay. All right. So let's move on to solutions. Olivier, do you want to say a few words about this? If you are here.
I think Olivier cannot attempt.
He's not there? Okay.
Yep.
All right, so this is another view to show you how the different solutions are interfaced together. So we separate here the two solutions, of course, the on behalf of on Visa side and the pass-through that has more complexity on the issuer level. So starting from the Visa DS side, we move on to the ACS, and we have here the three solutions. On the Worldline pass-through solution, we are directly connected to the FIDO server of Worldline, where there's an internal API that exchanges the data between ACS and the server, and that retrieves all the different information and values and values that the FIDO server can decipher. And then on the external pass-through, so how it works here, and of course we'll go further into the flows that imply this solution and the three solutions. We have an API that, the scoring request API, where the ACS through the web will be able to send the FIDO attestation and assertion to the issuer platform, so they can use their own FIDO server and return the verified data to the ACS. So what it will include, first of all, on the back office, there will be transaction details and specific information about FIDO. Also, we will include FIDO data in the scoring notification request API and in the data export API. And then in the reports, we will also have, for a report, we will also have the FIDO data. So again, that's a very generic view. We're going to the details of each flow so that you understand better how it is activated, how it is used by the ACS, and how it can be exploited. Okay, do we have any questions so far? Didn't check the queue or no?
Yes, Grégoire,
yes.
Please, on the previous slide, so you mentioned there is a pilot which is currently ongoing, and I was a bit surprised. Do you mean that it involves whole banks without knowing, or only some specific banks which have been made aware of?
Technically, it involves specific merchants because there are some willing merchants that participate into this. So since, it's not DAF transactions, so technically you could have this in any bank, but at the end, it will be used also under acquired TRA exemptions. I didn't mention that at this time, but so pretty much, I think that what happens is that you don't see much because it will be regular required key array, and the merchant does the authentication on top of it. That's pretty much it.
Okay, I get it.
Yeah.
I had only a second question for the pre-enrollment. You mentioned that the slide number 4. Can we update the ACS authentication page to display to the user that they are providing consent not only to the purchase but also to the device binding?
So yeah, the thing is that I'm going to move on to this right away because that's the next slide.
Yeah, okay.
But the thing is that this part, yes, but that's what is scheduled in 24.3. At this stage, the pre-enrollment, what happens is that when you have the pre-enrollment, the merchant will use two data. They will use the change indicator that will be set to 0.4, so saying we want an SCA, which is a pretty much generic value. I mean, it can be used for something else than FIDO and DAF. It just means that they want to do SCA. And on top of this, they will also add the 3S requester authentication method to 80, saying that they might do a FIDO registration. So that would be the information that you're talking about, and that would be interesting to have, of course, on the back office. So in the 24.3 implementation, yes, when this happens, there will be an information that says, okay, we received this information, meaning that the merchant wants to do a FIDO registration. Of course, at this stage, we don't know if they did it because that happens after. So, and we'll see it later, but this information will be available on the enrollment stage. But at this stage, we don't know. For this transaction, we can only say there's an intent to do FIDO registration.
Yeah, okay.
Okay? All right. So this step that we have here is global. It's common to all three solutions. There is no difference. So that's why we have it here. The idea, like I said, we receive these two information, and in 24.3, when this is set up, what happens is that there is a way in the APM to make a decision on these transactions to, of course, either accept or decline the transaction regularly, but also to send an additional transaction status reason, like we see here, at 91 or 92 that says, as an issuer, I am okay to enroll this this credential for FIDO, or I am not okay with it. So that comes on top of the transaction status. So it means that you will be able to set up in the APM rules, simple or complex rules. So of course you can include other elements. For example, if you want to, I don't know, to exclude specific bands or any specific merchant or with any other condition that the APM allows today, you will be able to add whether you allow FIDO enrollment or not. Okay, so that's an important step, because if you don't want to have FIDO on specific conditions, or if you don't want it at all, you don't want any FIDO enrollment at all, you can do that. Okay. All right, so let's move to, to the first solution that we're going to go through, which is the pass-through is Worldline FIDO server. So putting aside pre-enrollments, like we said, it's common. What happens after the FIDO enrollment is made at the merchant is a new authentication request that is sent by Visa directory server to the ACS. So like we said, this one is specific because it's not a real transaction. It's just using a 3DS to convey the FIDO data. So in this AREC, what we have is, first of all, change indicator 06, which means that there is a FIDO authentication that has been made. And we also receive the 3DS rec out data, which has the FIDO attestation. So the ACS retrieves this attestation and will using the, will share the data to the FIDO server on Worldline backend, on Worldline side, sorry. And this FIDO server will retrieve the public key. The public key will be stored by the FIDO server, will be stored on the secure environment. At this stage, the ACS will answer to the AREC with an ARES, but there's no actual decision there where the ACS will only answer with an information status, meaning, okay, that's an acknowledgement, we receive the data, we're okay, I mean, we can't say anything, just go forward. On top of this, of course, on the ACS back office, there will be additional information that say that there was a FIDO enrollment that was performed on by the merchant, and also any kind of data that we can have with the attestation. So there is no definitive list today, but it's pretty much any information such as when it was performed, what is the merchant ID, reading party ID, as many information as we can. So after enrollment, and that's the first time we're going to see this, the transactions that happens with DAF can be either on the 3D Secure channel or on the Visa Token Service channel. So that's an important distinction because it won't work the same way, and there are different implication. So let's see first how it works with 3D Secure. So in this case, when there is a new transaction, there will be a regular AREC that is sent from the merchant to the ACS. But in this AREC, we will have an additional field, of course, the 3DS rec out data here, that has a FIDO assertion. So remember, FIDO assertion is the signed challenge with signed by the private key of the authenticator. So when the ACS receives this, again, it will use the Worldline FIDO server, share the assertion, and the Worldline FIDO server will return data to the ACS. The most important data is the authentication genuine? Yes or no? But it will also add other information, and we'll probably see that a bit later, but it adds other information that can be also useful. And based on this main and other information, there is a way to act on this in the APM. So again, you can couple this with other APM conditions, but here the idea is that the ACS can accept or decline the authentication request based on the FIDO verification value. And there, the ACS can answer yes or no to the DAF request. So this is important. That's very specific. In this case of 3D Secure, there is a way to act and to decide based on APM rules. And of course, the DAF mechanism, remember, we are still on DAF. So for example, if we say no, the only way to say no to the authentication request and is to say there is a fraud that is detected, or the card is not even acceptable. So it still applies DAF rules that are set and that already exist. And again, ACS back office, we have the information about this assertion saying it was verified by the Worldline FIDO server and it is okay, and any other information that we can have. Now we're jumping onto the Visa Token Service rails. So this one is a bit different. How is it different? Well, first of all, initially a VTS transaction doesn't go through 3DS. So first of all, on the Visa side, it is not an AREC from the 3DS merchant going to Visa DS. It is an information that Visa retrieves through the VTS API. So Visa retrieves the FIDO assertion that we had before through the VTS API. There's one thing that is important there. In case of VTS, Visa will perform a FIDO verification of the assertion, which they don't do for 3DS. For 3DS, it's up to the issuer to do that. But here, they do this control. So if the control is negative, if there's an incorrect assertion, they will stop there. They will not go further. They will just say to the merchant, I'm not okay, stop what you're doing, the assertion is incorrect. If it is correct, well, it will still create the 3DS message. So it still includes 3DS, but just for information, like we saw before. So if it is correct, Visa creates an AREC, adds the assertion. The same thing happens on the Worldline end, where the ACS goes to the FIDO server, gets the assertion verification result. And at this stage, there's no decision to be made by the ACS. The ACS can only acknowledge the information it received. So that's why in this case, there's only an ARES with trend status at Y to do this. So again, and in this case, and that is important to understand, we'll have that in the other cases as well. It is Visa that declines and does the control if it is incorrect. And again, of course, I'm not repeating this in the future, but that's the same thing. Back office will display any information that comes from the FIDO verification performed by the FIDO server. Okay, is there any question for the Worldline pass-through? We're going to see the two other methods and what changes from this solution. We have a bit of time, so we have a chance to go also a bit further into what the Worldline FIDO server does additionally. Do you want to take that over, Stéphane?
Yes, no problem. So the purpose of this slide is to present to you the process put in place to validate FIDO attestation and assertion on the Worldline FIDO server. Okay, so on the left side of the slide, you retrieve the complete process apply for the enrollment. So what is important to understand is that the FIDO server will not only retrieve the data relative to the attestation, but also the purchase context and the prior transaction context. So all the data retrieved are corresponding to attestation, but also the reference to prior transaction. The prior transaction is a strong authentication transaction used to give the agreement to the merchant to process the enrollment. And we will provide also and check also the PAN and the merchant ID used for this both transaction. So regarding the control, the first control done on the enrollment phase is to retrieve this prior transaction and to check if this prior transaction is aligned with our decision and the enrollment. It means, does this prior transaction exist? Do we retrieve the same context? It's for the same merchant and the same card account number. Of course, as we said, we must make a strong authentication. So we will verify if a strong authentication and successful strong authentication apply for this prior transaction. And last but not least, we will double check if we give an agreement to the merchant. As explained by Grégoire, we are authorized during this first transaction to refuse, to not provide the authorization to do the enrollment. So we will double check if we don't receive enrollment from notification from merchant, but without our agreement previously done. Then after, if all these conditions are verified, we will double check the attestation contained. So the validity of the attestation, we decipher the attestation. As explained, we have all web button control, and in this attestation, we also double check and retrieve some information regarding the authenticator. So what kind of authenticator, FIDO certify tools has been used. In order to do that, we request the FIDO Alliance metadata service. So it's a huge repository handled by FIDO, which reference all the certified solution authenticator and provide some additional information regarding availability of this authenticator. And also we check the challenge, as explained by Grégoire. FIDO authentication is a challenge signed with a key, but the challenge is composed of some random value, but also with contextual transaction information. And for the enrollment, it's the ACS transaction ID. So we must retrieve in the challenge the prior reference ID of the transaction used to do the strong authentication. So all this control will be performed by the FIDO Worldline server, and if they are all verified, we will store in our database and dedicated database all this information and all the information requested to be able to validate the subsequent transaction. So it's the information regarding the context of the transaction, regarding the authenticator, regarding the attestation himself, and of course the public key, which will be used for the subsequent transaction sign message. Once all this information are verified and stored in the database, the FIDO server return to ACS a final status. It's verified or not verified. And a few data regarding the device use, the sign data, and if it's SPC transaction, the SPC data. It will allow the ACS to store all this information in their own database in order to restore and display this information in the back office, but also in order to be able to push this information in the scoring request or in the data export use feature. If we take a look at the right side of the slide, we have all the process for a subsequent transaction. It will be a little bit similar, but with some change. Regarding the context of the transaction, here it's a purchase transaction, just not a notification of enrollment. So we have a more important context where we retrieve of course, the PAN, the merchant name, the timestamp of the transaction, and the purchase amount and currency used during this payment. Based on all this information, and now it's assertion include in the message, the Worldline FIDO server will do additional control. Okay, first it will retrieve the prior attestation stored during the enrollment in their own database. It will double check if all the elements are coherent between the attestation and assertion. So the Worldline party is the same. We have the same row ID. We retrieve the same merchant ID, and it's for the same PAN, which all the transaction enrollment and subsequent are apply. Once we have retrieved this attestation, we will be able to decipher the assertion and, as previously, to double check the authenticator information with metadata service and so on. Then we will validate challenge as previously, but here what is important to see is that the challenge contains more context information because it's a purchase, so we will double check the merchant name, the timestamp, and amount and currency. And the goal is to double check that all the information contained in the challenge are mapping the information contained in the per 3DS transaction himself. Okay, just to be sure that the authentication signed by FIDO is corresponding to the context of the 3DS purchase transaction. And if we have a SPC extension, we will do an additional control because, as explained by Grégoire, when we are in SPC context, we are able to display an additional page on merchant side during FIDO authentication. And in this page, a merchant name and transaction amount was displayed. So the goal here is to double check that the merchant name display on the FIDO authentication page is the same as contained in the challenge value and the context of 3DS transaction, and same for purchase amount. If all these conditions are verified, we will have a final status verified, and as previously, the FIDO server will return to ACS all the information of the decipher of data and device data, sign data, SPC data, and all the response of the control done previously. Of course, if there is any issue and we are not able to verify the attestation, the assertion, we will return the reason of the refusal. And as previously, based on all this information, ACS will be able to take a decision to store all the information in the database in order to have evidence and logs for your back office and your scoring platform and your data export solution.
Okay, thanks very much, Stefan. We are going to move to the other solutions. I'm going to go a bit faster there. We just want to have a few minutes for the conclusion and maybe questions. The idea is definitely to show what changes from the first solution that we presented. So here we are with the external pass-through. The main difference that we see there is that when the ACS receives the attestation, it will not solicitate, of course, a Worldline FIDO server, but it will send the attestation as it is received to the issuer platform using the scoring request. So it will be up to the issuer platform to do the verification of the FIDO attestation, to store the public key, and just to say to the ACS, okay, that is complete. So that's the main change here, very simple. For the transactions, 3D Secure, same thing. We are sending as the ACS the assertion, to the issuer platform, and the issuer platform makes the verification of the authentication and returns a verification results to the ACS. So this verification result will be available, of course, in the APM to make a decision on the authentication request that has been received. And again, we have the chance there to answer yes or no to the 3DS authentication request. For Visa token service, same thing. We send the data to the issuer platform through the scoring request, but at this stage, it doesn't matter what. I mean, it's not that it doesn't matter, but I mean, the issuer platform cannot send anything else because it is required to be frictionless. It is required to just be an acknowledgement. So there is no decision here to be received. It will only be for the issuer platform to have the verification on their end and to have this for tracking and, of course, further exploitation of the data. When we move to the Visa on behalf of, so this one is different, but it is straightforward. What happens during enrollment is pretty simple in the way that Visa will add what we call the on behalf of FIDO extension to the AREC. The ACS receives this, and in this extension we have the information about the enrollment that we will be able to display in the back office. And again, we are at the enrollment, so we just acknowledge. For the transactions, Visa also adds the extension to the AREC and the out method indicator that just says pretty much assertion verified, incorrect, or not verified. So they do the job there. The ACS can exploit this information directly in the APM and make a decision based on the information received. So same scenario. And for Visa token service, same. We received this, but again, we said that Visa makes the control anyway. So it is just for back office display purposes. So you can have a track of the result that was provided by Visa in the extension. All right, so that's it for the different flows. I will let Ronan conclude for this presentation and lead to the questions if there is any.
Thank you very much. Yes, very rapidly, then as you understood, DAF FIDO is a quite complex system pushed by Visa. What is important to understand is that it's really focused on a browser-based solution for FIDO. We will propose 3 solutions, which will be available in 24/3, then in October of this year. It's to you as an issuer to decide which solution you would like to implement, or the pass-through FIDO server or pass-through external FIDO server, or on behalf of service from Visa. If we check advantage of each solutions quite rapidly, at the end, in terms of time frame, availability, roughly it's the same for all solutions on our perspective. The big difference is that if you have an external pass-through server to develop, for sure you will have a quite big project to be done on your side and interconnection to be done. The verification and the handling on the data, it's important to have it in mind because some customers, some issuers are really would like to have this information in their hands and not on Visa hands. Then for Visa on behalf, it's really managed by Visa and inside the Visa system. If you take the pass-through, you can have it on issuer control or Worldline control, depending on the solution you would like to take. And after that, there is a reusable of, I would say, a solution which would be based on a pass-through server or Worldline or an external, is that the fact that FIDO will be more and more used for ecosystem, for online banking, for 3DS or for any other usage. And having FIDO server out of Visa is also an advantage because it can be reused for other solutions. On the Visa FIDO DAF offers perspective, we are building these offers. It will be available in April 24. Then if you are interesting to have this functionality implemented in your ICS, don't hesitate to come back to your Worldline team, and we will be able to provide this offer to you in the end of April.
Yep.
I don't know if you have any questions around this very nice.
Yes, Renaud, I have only one question. Are there extra run costs for the verification made by the Worldline pass-through solution?
Alors, if you take the Worldline pass-through server, there is a run cost because there is some cost related to the server itself and the API management and so on at the transaction cost, and it will be available in the ICS offer in April. And after that, for Visa, there are also some run costs. I don't know if you're aware, but
yeah, of course. So, in fact, we will have to compare both.
That's it.
Yeah. Maybe a second question. What if we are late in accepting one of these three offers? What will happen as from 24/3 if nothing is ready in the ACS? I believe this cannot work then?
Well, the thing is that, so first of all, quick disclaimer on this. The program is there in 2024. There is a mandate to merchants, but it is likely that the volume of transactions is very slow at the beginning. I mean, today there is none, almost. That it will only pick up most likely in 2025. Second, it is expected by Visa, that's their words, that the large majority still will be on the VTS rails. So at the end, what happens if there is nothing? Well, I think it all depends at the end how it goes onto the authorization server, because in the authorization request, you will also have DAF information, also about FIDO. So it is up to the authorization system to accept them or not. So if the issuer decides to not accept them because they didn't have the chance to review the FIDO data on 3DS rails, well, then it just has to refuse them. Of course, it is not the best option because there are requirements on Visa's side to meet authorization rates, approval rates. So it is not the best solution. So I think it depends mostly on what volume there is. If there's low volume, I think there's no impact because it can be declined. It doesn't matter. But if there's bigger volume, which is unlikely in 2024, then that's where you want to have this quickly.
Okay, thanks.
We will monitor, of course, in the next month how the volume increases, and we will share this information with you in different events where we can. But we'll monitor this and see how it relates to the different expectations of Visa when it comes to thresholds, fees, and volumes.
Okay, thanks.
And if we are speaking about also availability and when this system will be live, clearly here the date we have put is the product availability, and for sure you will have to come back to your delivery team if you have a need related to a specific time frame. to check with the delivery team of your ACS for implementation data.
I also have a question regarding the regulatory mandatory requirements. Did I understood correctly that it's only mandatory to offer it, but not to do it, to use FIDO finally? Because at the beginning you showed the customer can refuse and decide in any transaction.
At the end, I mean, it's not even mandatory for merchant. I mean, DAF itself is not mandatory for merchant. So it's just that if they use DAF, they have to support FIDO. So if you have a merchant that uses DAF, yes, they will propose to the user to have it, but the user doesn't have to choose FIDO. I mean, they could just say no and continue the way they did it before. So yeah, I mean, there's overall almost no mandate from Visa, except if you do DAF, you have to do FIDO, but that's it. At the end, DAF is not even mandatory itself.
Thanks.
However, I'm just adding one thing on this. Still not mandatory, but Visa is adding the DAF, the FIDO on DAF mechanism to their program of click to pay. I was saying that initially, and they are pushing click to pay quite heavily today. So they are also pushing merchant and enticing them to use FIDO for their click to pay solution. So that could be a factor of bigger volumes if click to pay picks up. Okay. In any case, if you have any other question, feel free to ask us. We're there to answer them and to explain further how it works. If you have any question about FIDO, about DAF, we're there to answer them.
Thanks a lot to all, and have a good day. And we will send you the presentation for your reference.
It was very clear. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great.
Bye.
Thank you all.
Back to you. Bye.
Merci.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.